welcome to the second edition of our chat with Scott on data mesh. Let's see who's joining today.
Hello.
Hello, hello, Karen.
How are you? It's been a while.
Good. It is. I like
How's your...
when it's a little bit different context than it used to be.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm sorry for keeping my video off. I broke my ankle and I'm lying in bed trying to elevate my leg right now.
So because you broke your ankle, we didn't want to see your ankle, you know that, right? It's
You know
okay.
that, but I'm lying in bed in a weird position. I feel
No,
like
it's good. It's totally okay.
Hello, hello.
Hola,
Hello.
Scott.
Hello.
How's your Dutch coming along?
Pretty poorly right now. I've been so dealing with immigration stuff that I haven't gotten a chance to do good language learning for a while. So
Excuses, Scott. Sounds like excuses.
yeah, it is.
Well,
But,
I was with Scott this morning chatting. I told him he's only got excuses. Okay,
I know.
Always excuses. So what am I doing wrong? Why am I Zoom user? What do I need to do to be a person around here? Like,
That's a whole journey. That's a whole journey.
yeah, I need a specialist. Somebody get me a Zoom specialist. I can't figure this stuff out. I just do data. Just do data.
If you are on Apple, go to preferences. Then settings.
Preferences, general, cool.
Wait, I'll tell you where it is.
Thank you.
Somewhere, video settings, no users.
Exactly. Video, no.
So I think that what we were planning on talking about was a little bit of a continuation of what JGP had ended the last call on. I mean, we can always do free range. I don't really mind on that stuff, but I think we were planning on talking, at least to start, about how do you do cost management, cost containment, cost tracking, cost allocation. And as somebody who managed costs for a while, I tried to explain the difference between cost prevention, cost tracking, cost management, and cost containment, and how they're all different practices. And so I'd love to hear what other people are doing, but the approaches that I've seen so far on this are either that you as a producer are taking on all of the costs, or you're trying to shift as much of the cost for consuming to the consumer. And so you might have that the actual production of the data product is on the producer, but any other costs, or you even allocate some of that cost of the production to the consumer more and more. And what then becomes a potential issue is, are you discouraging people from actually consuming? Because that becomes the whole point of having data and data mesh, is that, you know, yes, you want to do cost containment, but does it make more sense to start from a perspective of, we're going to spend more than is necessary, or that is like by default that we could do, versus so that we encourage people to actually understand and consume and get into that mode, versus the other aspect of it. So I'd love to hear kind of what people that have been on the thing, and Yulia specifically. I invited Yulia because she's been doing some stuff with her company Masthead Data around GCP and like understanding the cost of an actual pipeline and things like that. So like getting to an actual ability to understand how much does a data product cost is maybe the very first thing. So I'd love to hear kind of where people have started from this and where people have seen issues and things like that. Does anybody want to start? JGP, I'll call on you to start at least. Or Yulia, you want to go? Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's better if Yulia has something to say, because I'm honestly, I don't have anything much to say. I have ideas, and I'm really eager to listen to the experts here. Go ahead.
Okay, I just can share the experience what we have with our customers and like how, so we added this ability to understand how much each pipeline costs. Basically, we know the frequency, how often it's updating. We know how, on average, how much it costs to update the pipeline or model. We know which tables, like which resources are taking part in this particular pipeline. And we also deliver how much it costs to run this pipeline within a specific time frame. So the fascinating part was when data teams onboarded the solution and onboarded this functionality, they discovered like dozens of pipelines that they're not using anymore.
Yeah,
Like-
somebody who managed AWS costs, the number of times I'd go in and go, are you still using this? And they'd be like, oh, that was supposed to be automatically torn down, but your teardown script didn't run properly and you didn't check if it worked. And so I'm wondering if that's going to happen. Like, I mean, are any of your customers doing data mesh? Because I'd love to know, because data mesh is about like having intentionality around this stuff. So I'd love to hear kind of how you're seeing that happen. Oh, and Simon has some stuff that he wanted to add as well.
Yes, please. Oh, you want to add or ask questions, Simon? Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that in my experience with large financial services and government, cost overruns is a massive complaint. And so the cloud providers and people like Snowflake, people like BigQuery, Azure, they get clients who turn around and have a tantrum and go, why have I been charged $60,000 for a query against a petabyte table? And so they're actually quite sensitive about it, and they make it as transparent as possible. And, you know, if you're a big organization and you're getting all this stuff, it comes with 100 days of free consultancy by the cloud provider. And they say, we want to help you with cost management. We'll audit your stuff. We'll make sure warehouses are turning off. We'll help you get access to the data. So mostly if you're doing pure cloud and you're doing SaaS and they know they can spank you, they will try and stop that nasty conversation and make it open. So we were at the point where we would take the analytics from out of BigQuery or Snowflake, whatever, we would mine that and make that a data product, right? And say, hey, look, we're doing an analytical data product with a dashboard, which is the billing, right? And when we did that HSBC, we built our own dashboards about, you know, BigQuery and whatever. That became the most popular product, the data mesh, which was, hey, we like the data mesh, but can we use your billing stuff just for our own like lift and shift projects or whatever? So I say that, you know, people walk into this, they just walk into the rogue query and there's a tantrum and there's a billing spike and then they get the observability. But it is kind of in my experience, it's a beginner's error. Like the moment you hit it, you understand how to do it, and then they come back and say, I've got quotas, I've got limits, I've got alerts and monitoring. And so if you put observability, you should be able to avoid it, right?
It's quite not the same. So the usage when it comes from users, and we heard all of this infamous stories when people just run this insane queries against some table and hit 20,000. Like, we have not that big companies working with us as of today, but there is a company startup and they have, let's say, a couple of thousand of tables, so that not that much. And they somebody in the organization just run the SQL queries that costed them over 10K. And that it was insane. And Google Cloud never took off that from their billing, which was, I also was impressed. After that, they implemented the limitations behind any queries that can go, right? And this is what I suggest to do to every single organization. Also have this policy of no select star, like no, you don't do it. No way. You have to learn the partitioning, you have to learn the clustering, and you have to educate your users, right? But what we do is quite different because we observe pipelines, automated jobs. And this is what Google Cloud doesn't have intention, I guess, as of today, to provide to their users. Because eventually what we do, we help our users to understand how much it costs to run their, to use a DBT in their cloud. What is the total cost of using this solution? Despite it's open source, but still there is a total cost of using it. The same with Looker. in the end of the day, a part from its license cost, it contributes to your cloud cost, and it could be efficient. It could be done more efficiently. And this is where we work with data engineers to do so. And when it comes to data mesh, because the systems become more distributed, right? It also means there are more pipelines, right?
Well, yeah, in a way. And I think the question also becomes, are we willing to spend more for innovation, for time to innovation, where we're a little sloppy with things versus not? And Amara, I see you've got your hand up, so I wanted, but like I'd love to hear, and then I want to talk as well about how people are billing, because there's the billing model, and then there's the cost containment model, and then there's the like how does that all work? But Amara, you've been on this journey for 3 years, so I'd love to hear what you're seeing.
So it's interesting to me that it seems like we have gone for a radically different approach, Julia. Like, we are not observing cost of pipelines at all. Sure, we have a platform and we maintain our boundaries to it, but with Roche right now, there is the cost of a data product team. And that's what we are looking at, for a business department. And because it's so big, what is the cost of setting up and the monthly run rate of a team? So what is the cost of a team? And in terms of a cost benefit analysis, is it worth to invest that this business domain has its own team? And we are looking less at the cost of what it means per data product of that particular business domain, because it's tied back to the business goal of that domain, and therefore the cost benefit analysis goes at that level. So you really presume that a team of, say, 5 people or 7 people with your data engineers, your analysts, your data scientists, all are encapsulated in that cost. And you're saying it makes sense for us to invest into this and all the data products that come with it in a 6 months to 1 year time range before we have a return on investment for the business goal of that domain. And yeah, so maybe I'll pause there for a second.
Is the billing then going back into the domain?
It's going back into
Okay,
so currently it's shared. It's a shared model basis. A business domain gets half. They agree to invest and pick up the tab for the data engineers in the sense of the people cost, and the platform is picking up the cost of, for example, or the IT department is picking up the Snowflake cost, for example. So it's a very different model, and we've never actually ever looked at data pipeline or per data product level. So for me, this is completely different. Yeah,
it's very interesting. I think as you go wider and wider, or as you have more and more like financial services, I think it's really, really, it's really, really important for you to have an idea of the cost per, because there's so much data flowing through and there's so much you can go so out of whack.
Yeah.
But in something like, and yes, I know like Roche and stuff has like crazy amounts of data in a certain sense, but it's not like this, 500 million transactions in a day like there is for the market model. But yeah, JGP, I think had your hand up first. Again, people can just jump in. I don't need to be, but yeah, I wanted to hear.
Amara, just a follow-up question on what you just said. So when you're looking about the data, the data product team, okay, so this is salaries, contractors, etc. But do you also include in that the cloud cost, or is that all being taken care of by IT?
Cloud cost is not included in this setup, but it's mostly, so Roche is not an IT organization, right? So for them, specialists come from what is called as a chapter of specialists, okay? And they have like all these roles in it. So when they say the cost of a team, it's like the cost of saying we are going to have 2 data engineers, 4 data engineers, 1 analyst, 1 data scientist. We will pull them from the different buckets of these chapters, and we will make a team together, and we'll assign it to this business domain, and there will be a long-lived team there. So it's that monthly running cost of having a data product team. And so there is never a conversation about the underlying the usage of it, or how much data even are we talking about, what kind of the scale of usage at all.
Well, and I think if you're not having that problem, it probably means that the costs aren't so out of whack.
Mm.
Because as soon as the costs get, as somebody who used to manage costs, as soon as the cost gets out of whack, then there's a big conversation. And the finance people, the billing people, you know, because I worked with FP&A, the top three things that people think that they hate spending the most, but the top three things that they hate most are surprises, and then spending too much. And so like that it sounds like you're lucky in that you don't have that. Simon, you've had your hand up for a while, so I wanted to make sure that I gave you some space too.
Yeah, so I'd sort of say that if you're going with a lakehouse, cloud-based lakehouse, more and more they can separate the cost of the storage, which goes to the person whose data product it is and happy to pay his high value, and the cost of compute, which is running the query. And you kind of want that separated compute that's not trashing browning out, you know, a single dedicated server, because the cloud can just, you know, you've got bandwidth to the buckets and whatever. And then you want to sort of say, well, you pay for your queries. The person who owns the data product's paying for the storage, right? And they also have a use case, but the person who wants to query it, they pay for their compute. Then there's some central costs, which is like, well, we have a platform team, right? And that needs to have some platform engineers, and there's a staff officer for the data platform, and there's some central resources. But what we were sort of doing is, you know, we got up to like dozens of teams, and it's like, okay, it's up to whoever's got the data product, the consumer producer, they're running a project, they've got a cost code, they need to fund their own team. We'll help them, but essentially which supplier they're going with to provide their own people. But essentially we want them to be doing the data engineering onboarding themselves, and that's their costs. They get cross-charged a little bit for the central team. We never really end up cross-charging for the Airflow infrastructure and the compute, because it's just, the bank's not bothered in setting up cross-charging for tiny amounts of money. It's just not worth doing. It has to be serious money. But the serious money is the storage and the compute, and that's running at, you know, large amounts of money. And that's kind of got to go. The person who owns the data pays for the storage. The person who's running the query pays for the compute. And if you don't like the cost of compute, well, you're not, you know, maybe you shut down your use case because you're not making enough money. And that's completely opposite of, I'm running an Oracle data warehouse, Oracle RAC, and now I need to scale it for everybody. And now I've got rogue queries, and I need to do some cost appropriation, you know, cost divisions. If somebody's paying for their own compute and you can put quotas on it, then there is no problem, right? In my experience.
Well, and one quick question there, because I know JGP and Yulia both have their hands up, but when you say the cost of compute, that is the cost of compute on query, but what is the cost of transformation, right? Is that where you were saying the Airflow job is minuscule, and that, or is that the cross charge for the platform of prepping the data to actually get it ready to land into a data product?
So exactly. So if you've got a pure cloud lakehouse, you know, separation, storage, and compute, then with this a serverless thing, so you can do it on Snowflake, it's storage versus compute and warehouses. You can do it on BigQuery. You're paying for byte scanned IO and storage. You can do it with, you know, the Spark technology if it goes serverless, you know, data science and all this kind of stuff. So yeah. If one team's like, hey, I've got this perfect Kafka stream and I have it already sorted out, and I just want to land it straight in there with zero transformation, and it just lands perfectly, they're paying for like virtually no IO to like land the data and no transformation. Some other team goes on and goes, it's a bonfire. I got this AS400, it's a turd, pardon my French. And I'm going to have to like extract at points in time, and I'm going to have to munch it. Well, yeah, they're paying for that compute. They'll run it under the service account of the producer. It will land in a private zone. They will do micro batch, and they'll be refining it and doing, you know, historization, monotemporality into a final table. Well, they're paying for that. They're refining the data product. But the point is, the consumer, when they want to run a query, they want to scan, they want to join or whatever, they're paying for their IO and compute, and it's not interfering with the running of the system, because there's enough bandwidth, enough compute, that it's not like, oh, somebody's innovation with data, they're suddenly going crazy and doing all these scans, they're taking down the system, right? It's like, no, they're running all those crazy scans, they're just paying a big bill. If they're happy to run a query once a month that's costing like $5,000, but they're charging somebody a service charge of $25,000 a year, well, good luck to them, right? They're willing to pay the bill. So, you know, it's their choice whether they want to cost optimize because of the separation of storage compute. And that's really, so if anybody comes along and says, I'm doing data mesh and they haven't separated storage compute, they're doing with things like Postgres, like, or things, I'm like, wow, that's a world of pain, right? That's a world of pain.
Well, if the finance organization really cares that much, because in some organizations they don't. Mine, I did all of our AWS cost allocation, and I just did the thing at the end of the month and just said, here is the allocations. And they had the auditors come and talk to me, and the auditors went away after about 3 minutes of talking to me. And they're like, that guy is so far in the weeds, we don't ever want to talk to him again because he's so like in the depths of this stuff. And I was like, yeah, I scared him away. Like, that's what you want to do. But sorry, JGP, you've had your hand up for a while. Yulia, you've had your hand up as well. And then there were some good comments in the chat
yeah.
as well. So
So-
JGP, I
so
wanted to throw to you.
Yeah, it's funny. It's funny that you're actually bringing up weed, Scott, especially where you are located. But whatever. Simon. So the thing is, so producer pays for storage, and the Airflow initial transformation, and consumer pay for what they consume, right? That's the model. Okay, and so it means that when you onboard a new consumer, then you assign him a project and you pay him, or basically say, I'm assuming I'm taking this project and then I'm getting my bill.
Yeah,
Something like an internal billing from the consumer, from the producer to the consumer.
Yeah, so I've done it on Hadoop on-prem, Ali Cloud, BigQuery, Snowflake, and Synapse, right? And so there's we have a Genesis pipeline. So there's a new team that's coming on board. We need to set up the AD groups. We need to set up the GitHub things. We need to some things we have to do. The waiting for other teams. Then we have our automation, which only takes 20 minutes and binds the cloud infrastructure to all these things. And we want to set up a unit of compute, a unit of storage. So it's like you'll set up buckets on ADSL2, or it's your project on BigQuery, or whatever else it is in storage. But we also set up your warehouses on Snowflake, or your service account that run the queries and stuff. And so that so on Google, we had like 40 different Google Cloud projects, so that we could, each team owned their own project, and they got the billing. And so they queried on their service account, they got the compute costs, for example, or they're storing on their project and storage account, they're getting the storage bill and the compute they're running to refine it.
And this seems to be the standard model. Carlos Sauna has talked about this. I think this was exactly what Sarita Bax at JP Morgan Chase was talking about. Yulia, I want to kick to you. And I also want to have one question as well, which was when I was at Tenable and I was managing these AWS costs, people were trying to tell me this is the cost per API call. But you'd look at it and it was the blended cost per API call, right? So when you think about the cost of compute, you think about this thing, and we had this one thing where people could call their entire set of all of their data historically. And a couple of customers that were relatively large were calling every bit of data they had ever dealt with the platform every hour, instead of creating an actual good query. And so we didn't have any of this stuff. So I'd love to hear how, especially somebody who's been building a product around this, how that works as well. Like, how do you think about that? But I want you to talk about what you wanted to talk about first, but I would love if you can wrap anything in there, because that has been something that has stuck with me for so long, of like, oh, the average cost of this API call. And it's like, yeah, if somebody calls it really terribly, it's 50x the cost of somebody calling it normally. So
just before, somebody will jump into this question of average cost of the API call, I want to bring a parallel of solutions like there was a question about which kind of team should handle the data processing, basically transformation. So from my experience back in, almost 8 years before today, I was working in a BI solution that was collecting user behavioral data from clients' website, and we would merge this data to their Google Cloud, Google BigQuery. And what we were doing, all the transformation along with all temporary tables, we were handling on our end. So our clients eventually were paying only for ingestion, basically for streaming API or a batch API. I don't remember which one we were using. So what I'm trying to say, we were paying for the storage, temporary tables for quite of a period in case there would be, the data would need to be ingested one more time or whatever in terms of data loss, and also for processing. And then later on, I discovered that solutions like Fivetran do all the transformation in the client's cloud with all the endless temporary tables, let's put it this way, and all the necessary things that should be done. And it is all built within the client's cloud. So basically what I'm trying to say, when you also build your internal, data products, you should agree on that. And that should be an open conversation, who should be built for transformation as well, which also makes sense apart from the consuming side is also always on the team that actually consume the data product. But this transformation layer should be deliberately discussed. This is how I see this situation today. Yeah.
Yeah, well, but I was specifically asking you about, like, so Simon was talking about, here's the cost of the compute, here's the cost of the storage, here's the storage is a lot easier to track, but that compute becomes is there actually a good way to granularly track? Like, are the clouds good enough at doing that? Because that's like, especially what you're seeing with Google, and they just raised their prices on BigQuery and things like that. So like, I'd love to hear how that actually, what you're seeing from that, because you're seeing that in actual action.
So I'd say we had base source aligned data products. We had some derived data products, which is normally standardizing across different base data products. Sometimes they are follow-on data products with refined actions. And then we had consumer side analytical data products. This is an insight they're trying to do. It's a report, it's a reg report, solvency report, it's a machine learning model. And effectively, we never got into, so it became like, if you're building an analytical data set and running machine learning, then how you charge that and what your cost for API call, that's your bag, right? And well, I've got this funding, I'm doing this, and I'm getting that base output. And nobody will still come at the data mesh team and go, can you price the queries? It's like, no, that like all the cost is going to that consumer, they're allocating their costs however they choose to do, right? So it was really important about the macro, like which program with which outcome is happy to do the base data product. So like, who owns the derived data product? Who owns that, the governance of it? On the consumption side, it's like, who's paying the bills, building that use case? How are they justifying that? How are they charging? That's them. Like, if they're innovating with data, they're going to fail, right? We want to see some failures. And so if the pay as you go and it's just config and then they're not making money and you get shut down, well, that's great, because then we're pushing boundaries and we're seeing some failures. And so, yeah, if somebody came to me and said, I want you to solve the generic problem of every single query for every single person, can you account it to an individual within the bank, particularly for like PII or whatever, I'd say, nope, right? Hand it over to that team owns it, and then how they want to secure and how they want to build it, and how can cost charge is up to their BI use case. So they're using Click, they're using this, they're using business tools. So it's about those macro costs, that as a new use case comes on, who's getting the bill for that use case? Are they success and failure? That's their problem. Versus and what you don't want is the producer of the data is paying prohibitive costs for somebody innovating in a sloppy way of their data, because that can't be forecastable, right? Some negligent user said, "Oh, I run up a bill of 100,000 because I don't care. I'm achieving my outcomes." So as long as you have the pain going to the right part of the organization is decoupling, then to me that's good enough. They can fight their own justification for their costs. That's my perspective of big organizations.
But it's the whole thing of, when you have super separation of resources and costs, that your costs are inherently going to be larger, but you have faster innovation and better scale and all of these things. So I did want to read out a couple of the things, because it's funny. The two people that work together are having a conversation in the chat. So Michael and Jen. So Michael had said, a while back, that's similar to how we're operating Simon. Each domain has an instance of Airflow, and they own their storage and workflow compute jobs. And we're looking at leveraging Google Analytics Hub to federate data. So another team pays for the compute cost for querying data, conceptually at least. One thing I'd also like people to think about, I don't think we have to answer this or there is an answer, but if we're charging the consumer for their consumption, does that prevent people from doing kind of spelunking type of consumption? Do we want to give people kind of free pass for your first time consuming from this data product, that you actually get to go in and play with this data product, and it's kind of on the house, it's on the data team to encourage better better interaction. So, but Jen had said back to Michael about their setup, agree. I believe an important consideration when thinking of passing on costs other than organizational budget processes and constraints is thinking about desired outcomes and incentives alignment. So Jen, you were literally talking about what I was talking about right there. If cost will be burdensome and prevent adoption for some teams, it may be worth absorbing if possible, if it helps further the goals. I acknowledge that this isn't always possible, especially in banks, I think. But I think if you've got, maybe that's on the transformation office or something like that, that you start to say, how do we allocate these costs into those things? And then Michael had said, we set up individual GCP projects and assign them to the cost owners. So for the storage on the project for producers, they own all the costs on that project. For consumers, they have an analytical project. We want to federate data into and allow the queries to happen in their project, especially if they make volatile views to do more robust analytics, they own the costs while those exist. And Sarita Baxton, her episode of Data Mesh Radio way back when, was talking about that a little bit like what Amara was saying, but almost in reverse of the consumer will go to a producing domain and will say, we're going to pay you for your development costs. We're going to pay you for this use case because we need this data. So we're going to literally transfer money from our budget to your budget to actually ensure that this gets created. And so I think that's an interesting concept as well. But I've been talking way too much. Is there anything anybody, I want to shut up for a bit and let everybody else kind of collaborate with each other, but
That's going to be difficult. And we need to wrap up in a way as well. Okay, we said half an hour. Okay, so Simon, a few words.
Yeah, so obviously we started off very ad hoc and very nimble, and we had some early adopters, and it was just all in, and the costs were consumed by the data mesh project. But always the exit point was like, okay, there's a workflow to onboard as a data product. You need the data owner, the data custodian, the data steward. We need the cost code. We need all this sort of stuff. So you couldn't get it set up unless we had those initial conversations and we knew where the costs were going for. I'm not advocating everybody starts that way. I'm advocating that they really just swallow the cost to get, the first 3 or 4 things running, and it's all just done in a central budget. But to really scale, you want to have that sort of like, we have to know who owns this and who's paying for it and what the project's signing and how it's going to get resourced. So that's what I wanted to say.
I just want to quickly share the very useful trick from our client, how they manage the cost in Google BigQuery, in Google Cloud, sorry. So they set up separate Google Cloud project with all automated pipelines and jobs running. And this this project was responsible for ingesting data in different Google Cloud projects. So they were managing every automation, and they knew precisely how much it cost them based on the billing for one project. And their data users were using other projects where the data was ingested, and they knew the consumption, and that would build on demand, while the project with automated pipelines was built back then by flat rates. So today it's, and how does it called, like a new billing? I just
reserved instances or prepaid or whatever.
So it's additions. So it's built per slots. And this hack saved them tons of money.
Oh yeah, I think that's a good word to end. Thanks everyone. Thanks Scott, and hopefully we see you, all of you, next week, and we continue our musings and roundtable this way. Bye guys.
Perrin,
Thank you so
let's
much.
have a quick chat. You want to shoot me a quick, because that is a question that I'm working on something around. So yes.
Okay. Yes, definitely. Let's catch up.
Okay. Thanks, JGP. Thanks for hosting on all the stuff.
Bye bye.
Bye.